Meeting. We've got a very interesting agenda, I hope you'll find. And first off, we'll start off with Louisa, who will give us the latest. And she won't be giving too many more reports and she'll be retiring soon. But anyway, Louisa, how are you?
Good, thank you. I just got off the ferry, so I'm a little frazzled, but I don't have much of a report because I have been over in town yesterday. Sidewalks are supposed to get started on 10/15 for Equestrian Avenue. So that should take about 3 weeks, according to the contractor. According to the town engineer, it may take a little bit longer. The barracks, the asbestos remediation starts on the 20th of October. So at least we're taking a step forward on that. Zoning update, I would urge everyone, please go on the website for the zoning update and just look at what Fisher's Island, it's not anything, nothing set in stone yet. So now is the time to look and see and make comments if you have them, if you support the change of zones or you don't support them. It'd be good to get in now, or if you have suggestions on pieces that you think should have had their zone changed or not changed. We're in the middle of the budget right now. Very tight budget. I know Jeb's put stuff in, and I think a couple other people might have put in requests for budget. But I can't really tell you much about it because we just got the budget this past week to look over the supervisor's budget. Now the town board is looking at it. I guess Beth is going to be talking about the community housing. I don't have much to report on that, except that the subsidies are in play for affordable housing, whether it's renovating something or building something from scratch. And now talks are beginning on what are called ADUs, the accessory dwelling units, and how some of the 0.5% money might be able to be used for that, encourage people to either add on to their house or to, if they have enough property, to put an accessory dwelling unit that can either be used for family or for someone that falls within the affordable housing range. And I think that's all.
Louisa, Ken Edwards just asked if the highway department buildings, I guess, are not in disrepair.
Funny you should ask. I spoke with the town engineer about that, about when they were going to get around to fixing the highway building. And not next year, unfortunately. It is on their list of capital projects, but it's not going to be done next year. And I don't know when it will be done. It's definitely in their sights because it really needs to be remediated or torn down and rebuilt.
Right. Okay, well, very good. Thank you, Louisa. I appreciate it. And next up, we have we have John Evans, who wears many hats, but I knew John over 30 years ago when his family was still here. I can't remember. He'll have to tell us when his family left the island. But anyway, it turns out that he is also operating the Navy Center here on the island, and he's going to tell us all about it and tell us all the other things he's doing. So, John, are you there? Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, John. And thanks for those who don't know me. I enjoyed very much my childhood on Fisher's Island. My parents were very, very involved in the community between the Ferry Commission, establishing medical resources on the island with other partners. I did a lot of summer jobs, worked with the utility company, with Ed Horn and Jay Hartsfield, learned how to run a carbon arc projector for the theater. Unfortunately, both my parents are deceased. They're buried on the island. And I've not been back until recently because I do head up a defense contracting company. And I just want to, John knows this is a difficult time for the Navy and for anyone in government to try to get official attendance for something like this. So I am speaking, not representing the Navy. I will share information that I can share that's not obviously classified. And obviously I want to be able to provide a little bit of background on the purpose of the facility out there. And what I will do is I'm multitasking tonight. I am also an active fire chief, and tonight is fire prevention open house for us, for children and families. So I'm I appreciate going a little early and being able to then focus my attention on the event. But for those who lived on the island, some of this is going to be very familiar. Fishers has had an active military presence that goes back to the Spanish-American War and all the way up to World War II. Fort Wright has a long and pretty rich history, a very interesting one, which I'm fascinated by military history. The current test range, which is what the property is on the island, was originally had a gun emplacement for a 16-inch gun, and that the location was critical to being able to protect the entrance to New York Harbor. Had there been a foreign attack, there was gun positions, I believe, Watch Hill, Fishers Island, and Montauk or Orient. Maybe someone could correct me. I don't believe the 16-inch guns ever ended up getting installed on Fishers Island. The facility has been there for a long time. It actually has, if you walk it, it actually has a lot of underground components, conduits and tunnels, vaults, and other types of installations that were actually built for its original purpose. Since then, the mission of that location has been really to be a very valuable test range. We have a long history in this area of being sort of the submarine capital of the world. It's not strictly Navy that's out there. Coast Guard also has been the site for testing, and its vantage point looking out into the ocean is why it's so important. The Navy maintains many test ranges, including one that we've attend quite often down in the Bahamas and other points around the world that serve different functions, either by depth. There's even a test range in Nyantic, Connecticut, in a pond. For those who are not aware of that, that is a pond that has a lot of depth to it and helps again support what is the Naval Underwater Warfare Center. Originally, it was called NOSC. As a kid, when I was on the Fish Island Ferry, I remember when the arch first went up at Fort Trumbull, I believe. That arch was used with a pool for testing antennas and objects that might reveal a location of a submerged vessel. That facility eventually was bracked, which means it was closed because of consolidating the different bases. And the arch and a lot of the employees relocated to the current Newark Newport facility, which we work very closely with that facility. Newark's primary mission is supporting submarines, but it does also support surface ships, which our company is a 35-year-old privately owned service-disabled veteran-owned small business. We predominantly hire veterans. We're approximately 95 people, and we support a contract. It's called the antenna contract that not only provides engineering services for antennas for submarines, but we actually run test facilities for Newark. So Fishers Island is one of them. There's an anechoic chamber at Newark and the arch at Newark that we also support. I can, for those who are interested in history, I can run a parallel as to the importance of that facility. A great book out there written by Ben Rich called Skunk Works. It's the history of Lockheed Skunk Works and the development of the F-117 aircraft. This what was originally the first real stealth aircraft. As the Air Force would test the efficacy of the ability for something to be stealthy, they have in the desert a pylon, and they would put airplanes up on that pylon and then aim a radar at it and try to measure what they call the radar cross section. How visible is it, to give people, and that's extremely important in modern day environment. Anyone that's tracking some of the conflicts in the world, being able to conceal yourself or not reveal your location is very, very important and tactical. The radar cross section, when they developed just the Blackbird, it was so effective that its radar cross section was the size of a bumblebee for a large aircraft, unheard of in those days. With submarines, I can't go into great detail, but you can imagine that anytime you stick a periscope up above the water or an antenna, it's an object that could be picked up. And submarines are one of our most important assets out there. And there's two types. There's attack boats and ballistic missile submarines. Both have very specific functions. Obviously, Electric Boat builds the submarines. There's one other location, which is Newport News. And a lot of the development work and testing is all centered around, again, supporting the fleet. Nothing very, a lot of what you can see, if you were to walk along the beach, even though that is government property, and this is all in the public domain, there's a very large sled that you can mount objects to, and again, can be towed out into the water for testing purposes. And that location, particularly being near New London, but right out in the open ocean, is a perfect location for doing that type of testing. I believe Coast Guard has done similar radio communications testings up on the upper hill. A lot of the property is disused. The building that you can see from the golf course was renovated, but currently is not occupied. It has some similar remediation. I heard something about a building being remediated because of asbestos. That building has some of the same issues. The barracks that you see from the road are technically considered historical buildings. They are supposed to be sealed and maintained so that they don't collapse, but already, as you can see, one of the smaller structures has succumbed to the elements. It's very hard with limited funds to protect those buildings. Their future is unknown. That is not something that we are involved in. Generally what will happen in summertime is the most time when there's a lot more people out there. There's a small group will book time to go out and do testing out in the water, do their analysis, and then come back. And it's pretty much pretty small operation. There is a warehouse building there to store equipment that we maintain, but generally most of the operations are on the water, even though it's a very large site. We discourage people from wandering there because there are, like the rest of the fort, and I remember this as a kid, you get yourself really into trouble with open manhole covers or, old bunkers that had chimneys that were open and covered with brush, and you walk on what you think is a hillside, and little do you know that there's actually a 20-foot drop into the old communications building in Fort Wright. But I do want to just give a little bit of background as to the purpose. My hope is, and I did reapproach our sponsor about at some point maybe being able to have someone from the Navy be able to address maybe a little bit more in detail some of the long-term needs. It's a very strategic location for us, again, based on proximity. And, I have asked them whether they would consider a tour of the facility, a guided tour of the facility. That might be an option potentially next year. But right now, everyone's focus, you can imagine with the shutdown, is actually just maintaining the existing programs. I'm going to pause there and see if anyone has any questions or not. John, I don't know if I've covered.
No, that covers a lot. I think there'll be a lot of questions. But John, how did you get recruited for this job, and how long have you been doing it?
So when I left the island and graduated, I moved to California and I worked for Walt Disney Imagineering. Before that, I was actually an electrician on an electric boat when I was going to Connecticut College. So I've always been a technician by heart. I did want to serve. I have a passion for the mission that we're doing, particularly the Navy. I have worked overseas for a very long time. I worked on, the '94 Winter Olympics, worked and lived in Scandinavia, came back to the United States around '96, worked for Mystic Aquarium and eventually headed up engineering for them. And thanks to being very close to and working for Dr. Robert Ballard, I got introduced to a company called SAIC that some of you might know, very well known defense contracting company, and eventually worked with them and got to know the company that I'm presently with. I joined them to head up special projects. And then later I told him I did not want to be a president of a company again, but the owner made a very compelling argument. Who's someone I truly highly respect, had a very distinguished career in the Navy, started the company. We started as a two-person company developing software, electronic warfare training software for the Navy, which is still used today. And now we are a very diversified company. I also work in the public safety sector. I teach tabletop exercises. Anyone on Fishers that's been involved with the millstone exercises probably has heard my name or my voice on the calls. I have specialty in radiological response. I teach classes, tabletop exercises for cyber attacks on infrastructure. And I have to tell you that, and I teach this at UConn and URI, there's cross-pollination of all careers. So what I learned at Disney is applicable to the work that I do now. I do a lot of R&D work. I've developed safety solutions for surface ships for the U.S. Navy that I hold the patent on, and we have deployed it on almost every surface ship in the Navy. And so my father was in the Navy, for those who knew Jack Evans, he was very proud of his time there. He served in 2 wars. I could tell him if he was still alive that I got my dream. I probably spend more time on surface ships and diverse surface ships than most sailors, and have been able to satisfy that desire to work alongside our sailors and to really develop some pretty important solutions. Our biggest contract is the one that supports these test sites. Has some really, really talented people that run these facilities. We have people that are subject matter experts in underwater communications, people with PhDs, anechoic chambers. For those who don't know what they look a lot like a soundproof room that you might use for like in a studio, but where they are basically RF neutral spaces, so no radio frequency interference can come in. So if you're testing very, very sensitive antennas and seeing how effective they are, they will not be contaminated by cellular and two-way radio communications interfering with testing the efficacy of that antenna. Like anything in the Navy, contracts have periods of performance. Generally, there's a 5-year contract. We've had it for more than once. We're hoping to have it again. I've asked my team to take great pride in the Fishers Island facility because it looked a little unkempt, and the workshop that we have there, we took a work party out and cleaned it up, made sure the commander realized that we want to be good stewards of the facility. It is a beautiful location. For me, it's slightly ironic that with being a child and wondering what all that equipment was out there, now I know very clearly what it is. And all my questions have been answered. And basically, if you've walked out there, there's a concrete round circle. It's basically a miniature version of the arch that we have at Newark. I can't elaborate any further on that other than it's for testing purposes. John?
John, how large a site is it and how much is used of the site for your
That's a good question. I don't know how many acres. If you go on a Google map, you can see it's pretty sizable.
Acres, that's what I've heard.
Yeah, and I can't really disclose how much of it's used. A good portion of it is used, and there's a lot of infrastructure that is necessary for supporting the testing. There's with all sites. So I would spend a lot of time at the Naval Warfare Center down in Dahlgren that also has test facilities, and a lot of these sites have diverse uses. They don't do just one thing. So Dahlgren, its main purpose for those who are interested in naval guns is that was the preeminent site where we developed all of the large naval guns, and they still develop the smaller naval guns for the Navy. There has a long, incredible history, but it's also a site that they do tremendous amount of R&D for other programs. They are also known for testing and developing UAVs, or unmanned aerial vehicles, which is as we can tell from the current what's going on with the current Ukraine-Russian conflict, is that we're now in a world of what they call asymmetrical warfare, where an M1 Abrams tank can be vulnerable to a very inexpensive drone. So it's everything's evolving. It's where what I find is I'm very heavily involved in public safety, other than being a fire chief and a medical responder. I've been a professional emergency manager for a long, long time. If anyone's interested in visiting me, I also head up public safety for the Newport Folk and Jazz. For the 2 weekends of that, pretty much every government agency and fire EMS service that's involved in it. For me, I'm very passionate about it because a lot of what I do for the government translates to protecting our citizens. And we are a very polarized nation now. But I always point out that, anything that helps protect us as a nation, which is sometimes hard to discuss, is worthy. And I can tell you that I feel, at least I'll speak for myself, I feel very satisfied that the work that I'm doing is valuable work, particularly the things that we've done for surface ships to protect the sailors and allow them to do their job, because they are our unsung heroes. Anyone that stands watch on a naval ship and looks at the amount of tasks that they have to handle, and quite often they are in very dangerous environment. It's a hard job and they don't make a lot of money. And right now our service members are not even being paid, as we know.
And John,
I hope that kind of, yes.
Before we open up to other questions, but are there foreign submarines out here off of Fisher's Island? Is that ever happened or happening or?
I will tell you that I can't answer it officially. I can tell you that if you Google search it, you will probably get confirmation that does occur.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You like how I answer that?
Yeah, that's
Good
very
one, John.
How about Richard? You had a question.
And by the way, just so you know, a really
there's-
interesting, really quickly on that point, and maybe some of the other people, I know some of the names on this call. When I work with Donnie Edwards and others, when I was lucky enough to be a sort of a junior lineman, I was told that in a house that was on the East End, a improvised flag was found that was a swastika made with wax. The theory was that Fisher's was used by Germany. They would drop spies off from U-boats and have them go ashore Fisher's first to kind of get acclimated and blend in, and then take the ferry to kind of do their mission. I don't know if that's ever been verified, but submarines have operated off our coasts a lot, not just in prior wars, but they are submarines are the preeminent intelligence gathering tool. They're not just a torpedo platform. They have the ability to listen and do other things. So I would assume that foreign adversaries are off our coasts.
Okay. Thank you, John. Any
There's-
questions?
Yes, there are a bunch of questions in the chat. So
Okay.
somebody says, do you have any information on the erosion prevention? So
That I cannot. I
Yeah.
can. What I will do is I will log the questions, or you can send questions that I cannot answer, and I will try to get answers for you. That is a question for that would be under the auspices of probably either Department of Interior or what they call NAVFAC Navy facilities. But I will ask for you.
Okay, and then someone's asked about the possibility of cleaning up those structures, but I think you already spoke to that.
Yeah, there's, fortunately, my understanding, and I've inherited, this responsibility, is that there's been some good relationships between the senior Navy officials and the island, particularly, I think, when it came to, addressing having a sidewalk and so forth. And I know there's, the reason why I wanted to do this conversation, I had hoped to get official approval, was to be, to be a good neighbor. I think it's important for the Navy to be able to answer some of these questions, and ultimately that's the goal of this. Again, I'm just representing myself and our company in support of the government.
And is the sled still in operation?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Here's another question. Is there a way to memorialize the interest of the island in acquiring the property for conservation should it be deaccessioned?
So that's a good question. I will definitely broach it. I can tell you that there is no current plan to deassess it. I think its mission, if anything, its use and mission is growing. And I can't divulge why, but I can tell you that it's warranted. Whereas there are other government facilities. I mean, I don't know if I've heard for a long time that at some point Plum Island is going to be available either for purchase or to for other purposes. I would say the question could be posed, but at this point, I don't think there's any immediate plans for that to occur. Hopefully that answered the question.
Thank you. Somebody else also says they would love if it would be possible to coordinate a visit to the Fishers Island School to present your story to the high school students.
If I can get, because if I'm not trying to be evasive, but it's difficult because obviously I hold a clearance and I have to protect the interests of the government and our company. I will if I can get official, I do this often. I do a lot of, particularly as a fire chief, I do a lot of programs for schools. I'm a big advocate for it. I will hopefully, once we're through this shutdown and people can focus, hopefully catch up back on their work, I will ask the question of the site head and see if I can arrange that. And I can also see if there's an opportunity, if there is a accessible location that can be cordoned off that would allow an overlook or something. Those types of things can happen. You just can't allow people to freely walk through the site because of the hazards and liability because I remember clearly as a young Islander, the Boy Scouts coming over and being granted permission to actually camp on the base. And I believe the government decided they couldn't do that anymore because of the fear, particularly if they wandered away from the camp, which they did, of falling and hurting themselves.
Right, thank you. Also, Richard Miller's got a question, which I'll let him ask.
John, I remember you, your sister, and your parents.
Me too.
I just wanted, I'm hoping that without breaking any confidences, you can clarify and confirm or deny something that I heard several years ago, but obviously after 9/11. What I heard was that the Navy put this facility on its list of surplus properties, and the thinking was that they could move everything to Newport and consolidate it at Newport. But that when Homeland Security saw that it was going on the list of surplus properties, which I assume is a public list, Homeland Security stepped up and said, wait a minute, don't do that. We need to monitor terrorists approaching New York City through Long Island Sound. And that facility is absolutely the perfect location for that. So no, don't sell it. Have you heard anything at all along those lines?
I've not. That's a really interesting question because I do work closely with Homeland Security. I've never heard that specifically for Fishers Island. I've heard that same argument for other locations, including out on Cape Cod. But that I've not heard. What I have heard, and this you can search this because it's in the public domain, is an interest in bringing back Loran. I don't know. I grew up with Loran A and Loran C before GPS existed. Right. My dad was an early technology adopter. So I remember Loran A having an oscilloscope and having to line up the waves to be able to provide a latitude and longitude. Because of the concerns of GPS easily being spoofed, which is out in the public domain, Loran might come back. And there was talk about maybe, testing that, but I've not seen that. I've seen, if anything, the Coast Guard's testing had sort of declined a bit. And then from attending conferences down in Norfolk, and I saw a keynote speaker from the Coast Guard. They're getting a significant infusion of money, but much more for the border and drug interdiction duties, not on the technical side. For those who don't know, the Coast Guard R&D Center is actually in New London, right adjacent to what used to be the Pfizer, the newer Pfizer location in the Coast Guard base. That building was abandoned for a while because it used to belong to NOSC when the Navy had the site there. Then it got renovated, and the R&D center is in New London, along with obviously they're in the process of building the museum there. But that's a really great question. I've not heard anything like that. I think the tendency nowadays, because bracking eliminated so many locations and sites that sometimes probably were regretted, there's been a sort of holding off on making sure that we have the ability to adequately protect particularly large urban areas. And I would assume that anything in this area, particularly when we look at the proximity to Boston and New York and other major populations, that there needs to be, reserving the ability to protect protect quote unquote the homeland as well as they can.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, John. I think we'll call it
Um,
in. Great.
uh,
We
John-
have.
John,
Yeah.
can I just make one comment, Sarah Porter?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hi, John. I have to say, over the years, we've taken kids down for IPP and toured the facility. Over the years, I've gotten to know the guys working at the community center and on the island that work there, and they couldn't be nicer. They've also accessed my beach because some of their stuff is washed up on the beach. And those guys, I mean, they are wonderful. And I did put the one out there. My main concern about that whole property is that it's a fire trap. And we've got a fire got started down there, and all, you know, if there's any way whatsoever to be able to clean it up and prevent, you know, yes, you know, we used to have sunrise services up at the top of the hill there.
Yes.
When my dad was young, and I remember your family so well. Anyway,
Well,
I think
Well, that's
that,
actually, sorry, go ahead. I don't want to comment on that, but please go ahead. I'm sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
the key thing is, with all the fires going around the countries, that area just scares me that it's not safe and it's not healthy. And if there's any way someday, if we can get through the stuff we're in right now. But I do have to say that the guys that do work there have always been pleasant and wonderful and very nice and very accommodating.
I'm glad to hear that. I probably it's a mix of both government, Navy, and hopefully some of my personnel. And I'll provide the feedback. I have one individual that is my manager for that. So I will. They don't get a lot of feedback. So thank you. I did recently, by the way. I think about a year ago, I brought the EXO out with me, and I gave them. They hadn't had a tour of the island. It was off season, and I gave them a full tour of the island. And then it gave me an opportunity also to visit. A location I hadn't been able to visit for a while where my family is. The one thing I was going to mention, and as I've been a firefighter now for, since I was 16, and I don't know if we have anyone, I think I heard Kenny Edwards is on the call.
Yes.
So I'm in Lyme, Connecticut, and I have a military base adjacent to us, and we've forged a really good relationship with them and with what is deep in Connecticut, environmental protection, to be able to train together and even do some controlled burns. I don't know if the fire department's done any training on the base proper, but I could definitely propose that, and that's something I would be very interested in helping be involved and plan for. I know Fishers is town of Southold, so I don't know, is from a permitting perspective, what's allowed versus what's on government land. It gets complicated, but it might be a way to deal with some of the concerns and risk, or put together a work party. So I will take all those.
John, and I can facilitate you getting in touch with the right people here. And anyway, because this has been very interesting, and people have loved listening, I'm sure. And we only want to encourage you to come back, and hopefully we'll get a tour, maybe a presentation at the school one day. But anyway, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
And really appreciate your participation. So
thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Bye-bye. And thanks, everyone.
Okay,
I send my best to you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Next up, we have Beth Cashel. Beth, talk about community housing.
Yes, hi, John. May I suggest that I hold back until after Stephanie and Kate? And the reason being is, if needed, I could come back next month. But given that the vote's coming for voting is coming up, maybe Kate and Stephanie make more sense to go first.
That's very gracious of you. Okay, Beth, thank you. Okay, so why don't we start? Kate, why don't we start with you, please? Kate Stevens?
Hi, yes. Hi, everyone.
I mean, I think you both, I've mentioned you both, really want to know your backgrounds and if you win, what you expect, what you want to do. And anyway, it's open. Go ahead, Kate.
Okay, excellent. It's good to see everyone. That was pretty interesting, and a great call. Lots of good topics to talk about. So I know many of you on this call, but just to give some background. I call myself a Northeast mutt. I lived, born in Boston, kind of moved my way down the East Coast, went to a Quaker high school in Philadelphia, studied literature and architecture in undergrad and grad school. I studied architecture. And then I went on to work in architecture and then eventually teaching. And moved here full time during COVID, although I'd been coming out, my whole life as a kid, since the 1970s. And like a bunch of people, I kind of became a COVID refugee out here, but I stayed, and put down roots basically, and have just jumped in wherever possible. And I sort of tell the story that when I was asked, my sort of first thing got really involved in was waste management. And when I was asked, I said, listen, I'll be on the dandelion committee, I'll do anything. Because I think when you come here and you're trying to make the transition from a seasonal person to a year-round person, it can feel a little difficult to break in. And then of course, once you do and things get moving, then, there are many opportunities. But just a shout out to people out on this call to always think about new arrivals and including them, because there's a lot of energy and interest, I think, and untapped potential. And so anyway, I've been on waste management for a while. I'm now the chair. We're doing a lot of waste to resource stuff, which you probably all know about, the food scraps program. Also doing some land use work, getting this path going from Silver Eel to Race Point, and getting the RFP out, which has led to now development of a potential solar field on the Cap landfill. So those are all really exciting. And been doing some work on some committees, the zoning committee, a little bit on advisory committee for the energy use on the island, the ETIP program, and then some coastal resiliency with the Nature Conservancy that both Stephanie and I got to be on the call, but I was part of the core planning group for that. I'm also have sort of moved through the museum from volunteer to special coordinator to now executive director, which I think sounds a lot bigger than it is, but I am playing a role in keeping with the new strategic plan of providing support to the entire staff. And I'm really excited to help people do their jobs and do all the great stuff they're doing, and support the mission of the museum to educate and preserve history and habitat on the island. And according, as many of you know, almost 400 acres of open space are protected through the museum's land trust. So that's sort of what I've been doing on the island. I guess to say what I will do, if elected, is just take some of these ideas that have become apparent are in common, both on mainland Southold and on Fisher's Island, around housing, small business, infrastructure, climate resilience, and protecting our island character. There's broad consensus that these are priorities, and there are resources on both sides that can be shared and learned. So I'm eager to build partnerships and to find resources for Fisher's Island, to share some of Fisher's Island's successes with mainland Southold. And but we also have some really specific issues that came up in sort of the town hall style lunch we had a week or so ago around, health insurance coverage and access to the DMV. There's obviously also really persistent concerns about where our tax dollars are going and how they're translating into services. There's also some need to clarify about the Enabling Act, what this means in terms of the ferry and the town, in terms of who owns what, who rents to who, where the rents go, all these things, which really need clarification. I would say the main sort of theme of all this is better communication, both directions, and ongoing communication. So one of the things, some of the things I would promise to do would be to have office hours on the island, and also have them on mainland Southold. So I could, because as the representative, you are not just a representative of Fisher's Island, but you're representing at large the entire town of Southold. So you've got to have your sort of mind in both places. And inviting town council members, not just the Fisher's Island representative, but other town council members to cycle through our ICB meetings. So they hear firsthand the kind of issues that we're all facing and our concerns. And it's not just like a one and done, or they come once and we just all pile on and then they're like, never want to come back. So sort of normalize that exchange. There's some other things, like have been talked about, maybe a periodic ferry or shuttle going back and forth. I don't know if it'd be quarterly or it could be on a trial, but getting us moving over to mainland Southold, and actually, going to the town hall, understanding how we are connected. And then I would say also not just working with the town, but also working regionally. I think there are a lot of missed opportunities, or there's a lot of fertile opportunities for regional collaborations. I mean, something I think would be amazing if we could start an island conference. I actually talked to the Island Institute about this a few years ago. There's an island conference which is not our islands, but it's sort of the main islands. And then there's a mega island conference for all islands, but a specific island conference that would sort of connect Long Island through us, through Block Island and Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, and and perhaps Cape Cod even, and look sort of annually at key issues that face us all. Let's look at how we're all addressing housing. Let's look at how we're addressing transportation costs. Let's look at how we're addressing infrastructure. So learning from each other, sort of breaking out of the silo mentality, and just trying to become sort of more of a synergistic community. So.
Well, Kate, thank you. Thank you very much for that. I think probably best before we throw questions out there, let's have Stephanie follow here, and then we'll have questions for both of you. Stephanie?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I think most folks know me, but for those that don't, I'm Stephanie Hall. I was part of a naval family. My father was a submariner, so it was great to hear from John Evans this evening, but grew up primarily in southeastern Connecticut. I've been a year-round resident for over 30 years on the island, raising my two sons, Harrison and Nicholas. Professionally, I'm a clinical research scientist with a bachelor's in biology and a master's in molecular genetics from McGill University. I have over 30 years experience working primarily for Pfizer, commuting from the island for about 26 years of that time, but then more recently working for another pharma company. And I'm running for this position because I'm really concerned about the decline of the year-round population. As a fire commissioner, I'm hearing, that we're at critically low numbers for the fire department, to the point where we're having to consider planning for a paid fire department. And nobody wants this, so I'm hoping that, we can do something about it. And if elected, I would like to start by developing a strategic plan to attract and retain young adults and families to the island. When I moved to the island 30 years ago, there were more than double the year-round population that we have now, with lots of young families, and that's what primarily attracted me to move here. And it's just declined from then to where it is at this point. And I think that this can be done as a community effort. I don't think we need a consultant to come and tell us what we need. I think as islanders, we know what it takes to live on this island. And there's a lot of talent here. And, I think there's a lot of drive to make it happen. I would also like to create some working communities, and they may already exist in some form, but, committees to support this plan, to really dig into the issues and become subject matter experts to make recommendations along with estimated budgets, so that we can approach either Southold or other funding agencies with robust proposals that will be more successful. And, if elected, I'll represent the interests of Fisher's Island. But, I agree with Kate, you're a representative for Southold as well, to the best of my ability. But I'll also hold Southold accountable and ensure that we get the allocations that we deserve and the services that we need.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you both. Do we have any questions out there for either candidate?
Well, there's a question that was for Kate, but it might be relevant to both. It's, if elected, do you intend to give up some of your other positions?
It's a great question. I can't say that that's the first time I've been asked that question. Well, I think that's to be determined. I mean, I think, waste management as a commissioner was quite involved, but now that we have a full-time manager and a very functional business office, it's become more of a right-sized position. So I don't see that as a conflict. And I'm not sure that it's clear from the announcement, but my role as executive director is actually a part-time position. Certainly all the other town council members, with the exception of one who was superintendent of schools and took this after she retired. So she's town council full-time, sort of, even though it's a part-time position, that's her main paid position. All the others have other jobs. Some have 2 other jobs. So I think it's par for the course that you are having kind of other sources of income or other activities that you're doing. And that's just part of the deal.
And Stephanie?
Yeah, I mean, so in my job, currently I work remotely, so I have flexibility with my, responsibilities. So that's helpful. I will have to do an assessment, once I understand, what the workload is, to see whether I would have to let go of some of the volunteer work that I do. But, I would definitely try to retain as much of that as possible because, I enjoy doing that and giving back to the community as much as I can.
I have a question. Do you think that Fisher's Island is getting their fair share from Southold in general of what we send to them and what they give back? I'd like to hear both your perspective.
Yeah, I actually just talked to Al Krupski, the town supervisor, about this. I said, this is an issue. Everyone's asking, what's the deal? And basically, I mean, like any town, there are 9 hamlets and 1 incorporated village. So the hamlets all are one pot, and the incorporated village is a bit separate. It's a little complicated, but the hamlet of Laurel or Cutchogue or Mattatuck are not asking, are we getting our share? The idea is that you're all putting stuff in and then stuff is going to being redistributed across the town. So I asked, is there a way to become to kind of tease out those details? Said, not now, we're working on the budget, but it's conceivable. So that could be something that could be followed up on. I do know that the highway superintendent, Dan Goodwin, as he mentioned in last week, has done this. He's identified 10% of the budget for roads goes to Fisher's Island. And so what's happening is he's actually tracking that in a standalone fund. It's the only hamlet he's doing that for. So capital improvements for Fisher's Island, if they don't get spent in a given year, they roll over to the next year. So it's sort of a piggy bank that's continuing to build. And I think in his mind, the goal would be to have that get big enough so you could actually come over here and have enough scale of project that you could get very more competitive bidding instead of just nipping at things, bit by bit and having all these logistical costs. You could kind of do more in one fell swoop, I think is what some of the goal is. That's
Yeah,
a potential mechanism to pursue.
And for me, I don't know that I'm as informed as Kate, but it's definitely something I would look into and learn.
Well, I know Martin Van Hengel has been doing a study of tax revenues, and we'll probably get him to report one day, but it's always difficult to figure out what Southold is actually spending on us. But I think it would be interesting for all of us to know that. So anyway, keep that in mind. Are there any other questions?
Yes.
Yes.
How would you build bridges between Southold and the island? How would you handle accessible healthcare on island versus New York State healthcare? And how would you support the aging demographic?
Great. I think bridging has to do with communication, a combination of using technology, and maybe more engaging more as community members with what's going on. There are a bunch of committees, there's land preservation committees, there's anti-bias task force. There are all these committees that are existing and talking about issues on mainland Southold that we can be part of. We can purchase, as you know, Staley, from being on North Fork Civic Association, you can actually connect with your counterparts and riff on ideas and cross-fertilize. So I think we should take more advantage of what Zoom provides and be more engaged just across the board. In terms of healthcare, we know that is a huge problem. There has been some movement on that. I don't know if anyone on this call knows more about how it's going for people who are trying to take advantage of the the Fisher's Island exemption to access New London area physicians and have it be covered under New York State marketplace insurance. I know in theory that exists now, but I have no idea if it's actually working. But at least there's some movement. I think that's a positive. And then finally, the elder issue. Can you reread that? Is that elder care or is that elder?
How would you support the aging demographic?
I think it's already, I mean, there's such a strong sense of community on the island. It seems like it's a great place to be at all ages, particularly at that age of life where you can be on boards and be involved in things. And the Island Health Project via Capri has put in place some great support in terms of specific needs, ranging from home health care to ultimately hospice support and other things. I think there's also an issue about housing where we need a housing stock that has a broader range and is more variable so that if you're downsizing or if you just need a small place, but you want to be in community near other people, we would have that available to people. I've also heard people talk about a hybrid situation where maybe, older person who's maybe living alone and a younger person who can't quite afford a place, maybe there's a housing type that works for that. Certainly we also need some starter apartments out there too. So, but Fishers is, I think, a wonderful place with all the programming and all the care and camaraderie in the community to be that age, from what I can see.
Yeah, and I agree with what Kate said in terms of, communication. I think with Southold, it would be also good to have more touch point in-person meetings. We have the Town Father's Day, which, is historical, and I wouldn't want to get rid of that, but I think it would also be nice to have more in-person meetings with them. And I don't know if the Fisher's Island exemption is working. That would be good to pursue. I'll try to find out if I can talk to a few local folks that might be using it to see if that has helped in terms of healthcare. And then for the elderly, I know there's some, Islanders had helped to get some folks certified to be able to provide in-home care to elderly folks on the island. And, I think that was a good start there and certainly something we can build on.
There's one more question. Let's see. Increasing the size of Fisher's Island resident population is crucial. What specifically would you recommend for housing and for jobs?
Yeah, for me, I think, this would be part of the strategic plan. And, I think we need to have, working committees really dig into this issue and become, more informed about what might be needed, what might work for us. I think for me, it's too early yet to, put anything specific there.
I feel like it also comes just down to housing availability because you've heard so many kind of stories about in the last year about strategic plans, about people being offered jobs, whether it's at the school or for the library, that, they're a great candidate that went through the whole process. And then in the end, it just came down to there not being housing. So if we don't have a place for people to live, they're not going to move here. So there's that element. And I think there's also a bit about, obviously, we need to make sure that our businesses, that people have a living wage, that they can afford what it costs to live here. We have mechanisms through Walsh Park specifically to keep housing within reach, that organizations should get all our support. I mean, they have a fundraising, we need to rally around with a housing pledge or I wonder if all the organizations on the island could have like a 1% or some percent for housing that could all go that direction and just take the weight of the effort of fundraising, lift some of the weight of the fundraising, because we all know that that's what we need as a foundation to make that happen. So.
Here's another question. Would you recommend more options for ferry or private ferry commuting?
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
I was such a Silver Eel fan. It was so sad. I loved that boat. But I understand it didn't work economically. But I wonder if there could be some grants or something about, framing us as this small year-round community that's disadvantaged by not having access to mainland services. And maybe there's a pot of money out there that could go towards funding sort of a high-speed shuttle that could also be used for our students to shorten their really intense long school day and commute more of a commuter mindset where some people actually could live here, and I know people are already doing that with the Popeye and others, but to have some more options for that would be really great. And if it was electric, it would be even better.
Yeah, I can say for me personally, the commuter ferries were, that service was great for me. I mean, it shortened my day by several hours each day and just made it easier for me to, to live here and to participate in more.
Here's one more question. This is for Kate. Would you be willing to encourage the museum to redirect some of their land conservancy efforts to affordable housing efforts?
Well, that's a very interesting question. That is on everyone's mind for sure. And it is true that land trusts are making a foray into affordable housing. So that's not unheard of. I think that that would remain to be seen. It's not within the purview or the mission of the museum at this point, but I think we all care about supporting a strong and resilient community, and possibly there could be properties that would allow for both a combination of land conservation and affordable housing together. Could be an easier way of framing that. But that's something to keep that conversation we should all keep alive. It's really important.
And here's another question. Where do you see Fisher's Island in 5 years?
Well, hopefully with many more year-round residents, if we're successful.
Yeah, I also agree, and I think it would be great to see some pilot projects, some examples of some different types of housing, converting some large homes to allow for more dwelling units within them, more ADUs, like Louisa was talking about. We have so many of outbuildings already that are vaguely already apartments. That would be such an easy low-hanging fruit solution. And maybe in some targeted areas as the community is able to accept some new housing within sort of smart growth within kind of the village area on the west end, obviously kind of closer to where all the services are, where there's sidewalks, and so not sort of out in fresh open landscape. So I'd love to see, so then we could start to have a bit of an inventory, or at least a sense of, these different strategies as toolkits. And then they could inspire, we don't want to do that again, or, oh, that worked, let's do some more of that.
Have you thought about ways that you might promote more employment on the island, or creating new businesses? Or, I mean, we need the housing, but I think we also need some good paying jobs on the island. And that's always a concern I hear at the ICB. Do you have any ideas on that? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I agree that it would be good to, have opportunities for folks to do other types of business, and people can work remotely now. I could never have imagined that I would be able to do what I'm doing now 30 years ago. But, because of, internet and I'm able to work remotely.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of the work that's going on with the Fisher's Island Fund, with the the mini splits. There's a whole world, I think, of energy retrofits. There's sort of a whole industry, I think, of, because when you look at the island, you think, okay, most of the industry is around landscape and buildings. And I think there's another layer of building industry that we could get into, which is smart building and retrofitting buildings intelligently, and just sort of everything we know about the energy infrastructure and all the work that needs. So I think potentially that could actually draw some people who have expertise in that to the island for sure. I also think the school, I know many teachers live on the island already, but maybe there's an aspect about the school through the strategic plan, and maybe there's something about the school kind of drawing more students. Who knows? I mean, I'm just thinking that that is such a clear, when you have a good school, and in a sense, that's kind of the kernel or the heart of a community. So I think this, as the school, evolves, perhaps there could be some aspect about that which might draw some individuals. I mean, certainly there was a beryllium thing, is that's obviously not coming back, you fantasize about somebody makes kites, or something, sort of a low footprint, beautiful thing. So there are also, as Stephanie mentioned, remote workers. There are plenty of, I think there are a number of artists who have come through Lighthouse Works to the island who would consider living here full time. I know one in particular, but I know there are more where they're housing. So those are people who would be creatives who are living on the island, living and working on the island.
Thank
And I
you.
will add that there's also been some talk about some other marine aquaculture ideas. I don't know if Alex is still on the call, but there could be, we have one oyster farm there, there could be more, maybe we have kelp farmer on the island.
Anyway, worthwhile exploring all these opportunities, right?
Yeah. One more question. Do you have any ideas on how you would collaborate with the town's economic advisory committee to generate ideas for jobs or support current businesses?
Yeah, I sat on one of their meetings on Zoom, and it was a little bit chaotic. That's definitely a committee we should have someone on from Fisher's Island. But they are talking about a business incubator and sort of struggling with, well, where would that go? But it seems like a no-brainer to, instead of thinking about brick and mortar for that, just thinking about programs. They should be hosting trainings and things, dispersed throughout the town, in a library here or a business office there, where they have experts come in, and whether or not it's learning how to code or whatever the skill set is. And certainly on Fisher's Island, if it were done that way, we could access that remotely. I know that the Islanders for Islanders, I think, provide some grants for training and things. So we have, that we have sort of an element of being able to support our sort of continuing education and training among our community. And I think the Economic Development Committee could promote that kind of diffuse, able to access through hybrid format trainings.
Well, thank you. I think that probably wraps it up. I want to thank you both. We're lucky to have such interesting, qualified candidates, and I wish you both luck, and appreciate you trying to participate on the island and helping us out in Southold in the future. But anyway, I think that's about it, Staley.
Yeah,
Right?
I just wanted to add, I've heard that so many times at the community center. People are so grateful that you two are stepping up and running. And, it's easy to sit on the sidelines and complain, and it takes a lot more oomph to get engaged. So I know so many of our community are so grateful to you both.
Well said, Staley. Anyway,
Staley.
thank you everyone for participating, and have a very nice evening, and see you next month. And happy Columbus Day weekend. Okay.
You too.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.